The town laughs when Jacob Hale buys the ruin. They laugh at the flaking brick and the broken windows and the moss that has climbed the old mill like a slow green fire. They laugh because the wheel is gone and the river, once shouldered into obedient power by men with chisels and grit, has scissored a new course and left the Ashford mill high and sullen on a spit of shale. They laugh because Jacob pays in crumpled bills and silence is the kind of currency that makes people want to spend gossip. On the morning he first steps inside, the place breathes cold at him. Dust lifted by his boots, the smell of mouse nests and wet stone, a tang of iron like a cut on the tongue. Jacob stands steady as a fence post and lets his eyes adjust. Light knifes through a row of shattered panes and freezes in motes. The air hums with an almost sound, something like a string under tension, something like the river remembering. He listens. He has learned that if you listen long enough, a thing reveals the story it once told. There, beneath the layered quiet, a small rhythm keeps time. Drip, drip, drip. A leak? No. He tracks it like a hound through the husk of the main room, past a collapse of timber that smells of old wheat and rain, toward the far wall where a door squats in a frame stuffed with burlap. The door is wrong, too narrow, too heavy. The hinges bite into stone in a way that says this was meant to keep something in, not out. Jacob eases it. The door gives an inch and complains. Cold breath sighs from the dark. He angles his head into the seam. The dripping becomes a ticking. No, count it. Tick, 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 then silence. A clock with a broken second hand. A heartbeat that forgets to beat. When he pushes his shoulder, the door yields more, and the smell hits him. Not rot, not animal. A miner's smell. The chalk of limestone, the metallic rasp of buried water, the hush of earth worked by hands that meant not to be seen. He wedges his boot and shoulders in, scraping past splinters, into a corridor the width of a coffin. His fingertips read the wall, tool marks in the stone, shallow as a whisper. He takes 2 careful steps. The ticking stops. He waits until the sound returns, and when it does, it's closer, like a pocket watch tucked under the skin of the wall. He wants to knock. He wants to say, "I hear you," but he doesn't. Jacob is not a man who rushes a thing just because the town does. He retreats, slow, and eases the door closed, as though a draft could blow away what he has found. Outside, the river hoots and shoulders past a bend. Crows stage their laughing congress on the power lines. Across the road, a black pickup idles, the driver's elbow out the window, a pale twist of smoke connecting hand to mouth to sky. Victor Lang, land developer, likes to watch other people work the way a hawk likes to watch field mice. Should have asked me first. Victor calls without looking directly at Jacob. I'd have saved you money and time. Jacob wipes stone dust off his palms. I didn't buy time, he says. I bought this. Victor's eyes flick to the mill, then back to Jacob, slow as a blade returning to a sheath. You bought a tombstone, he says. For your farm. Jacob doesn't rise to it. He turns back into the cold mouth of the mill. The ticking resumes inside the wall. Patient, metronomic. That night the wind comes hard from the north and the mill takes it and talks back. The old beams groan, and the slate roof clicks as it settles. Jacob unrolls a sleeping bag on the office floor and lies on his back, eyes on the dark seam of the door, listening to the mill's private grammar. The floorboards smell of ledger ink and mouse urine and a sweetness like dried apples crushed into dust. He holds the finders quiet in his chest the way you cup a moth to keep it from burning itself on a lamp. Tick, tick, tick. He does not sleep so much as he keeps watch, and the town keeps laughing, and the river keeps telling the same story it has told for 120 years. You can move me, but I remember where I bit the rock. Morning drags its gray sleeve over the windows and the water takes on pewter light. Jacob sits up. He smiles, small and private, because he has heard the first sentence of a secret. And secrets, when properly tended, grow into fortunes or catastrophes. The difference lives in the hands. Briar Hollow is the sort of place that grows under the fingernails. You don't notice it happening until it has stained you. Jacob Hale was born here, left once, briefly, and came back the way a homing pigeon returns more by memory of the wind than map. He runs a thin, stubborn farm at the edge of town, the kind that survives by diversifying. A few acres of corn, a rotating flock of chickens. Winter firewood he splits and sells to vacation homes that want the illusion of hardship without the blisters. He knows the name of every cow in 3 counties. He knows where the frost lays its hand first each autumn. He knows in his bones the particular silence that follows when work doesn't pay. Debt curls around him like ivy, patient and green. His father, a man with hands like spades, spent the last years of his life staring at the hill beyond the barn as though the hill owed him money. When the old man died, Jacob inherited the house with a sag in the roof and a tractor that swore in a language of rattles. He inherited, too, a kind of stubborn decency that makes walking away from a fight feel like shoplifting. When the Ashford mill went up for tax auction, Jacob didn't plan it. He went to the courthouse because his truck needed a part, and the hardware store sits across from the steps. He lingered because the courthouse lobby is warm in winter, and he had mud on his boots that he didn't want to carry into the parts aisle. He lifted the bidding paddle because in that hush of chalk dust and quiet coughing, he thought of his father's eyes and the hill's indifference, and the way the river sometimes hums like a wire before a storm. $50, $90, $200. He kept his hand steady. At $400, the room shrugged and let him have it. Everyone said it was a mistake made by a man drowning in mistakes. Victor Lang said it loudest because a ruin next to the river didn't fit in the brochures for his riverfront heritage cottages. Victor wears his confidence like a pressed shirt. He doesn't sweat. He smiles without showing teeth. He calls Jacob neighbor in a tone that fences more acres than it opens. Jacob brings the mill coffee in a thermos and a broom without a handle. He brings a crowbar and a headlamp and the kind of patient curiosity that other men bring to church. He brings down one collapsed beam and props another. He finds a stack of ledgers swaddled in a mildewed tarp, names, weights, deliveries. He finds a bundle of letters tied with twine so thin it has turned into hair. He finds the door again, and he finds that he is not alone. Sheriff May Collins stops by under the pretense of checking the property transfer. She leans against the jamb, boots muddy, hair frizzed by the river damp. "You hear it too?" she asks. "The ticking," Jacob says. She nods as if that's an answer a law officer expects. "Well, if it explodes, call me first. I don't want Victor getting the scoop." Out beyond, in the static blonde field, crows pick and gossip. The river, invisible from here, sends up the wet breath of winter. Jacob rests his palm against the door's cold wood the way you press a fevered child's forehead, and for a moment he could swear whatever lies behind it presses back. If you're new here, if you're listening from somewhere warm and bright, from a city where water means faucets and not lives, lean in with us. This is where stories deepen. If you're enjoying this journey into Briar Hollow and the ruin by the river, hit subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice keeps small stories loud enough to be heard. On the third day, Jacob pries up the baseboard beside the narrow door and finds a child's marble lodged in dust, blue as a bruise. It looks freshly dropped, impossibly clean. He rolls it between finger and thumb and listens. Tick, tick, tick. The sound is clearer when he kneels, as if the floor is a drum. He maps the mill with chalk, marking where the ticking grows stronger. He draws a shaky constellation across the boards, a scatter of X's drifting toward the old turbine pit where the wheel's axle once fed power into gears and belts that sang a hard song of industry. The pit yawns like a dry well, ringed by brick glazed with a century of damp. A chain sags from a rusted bracket like a tongue. The river changed course after the 1987 flood, townsfolk say. The wheel jammed, men left, the river forgot. He drops a pebble into the pit. It hits something with a dull metallic complaint. Not stone, not water. He shines his headlamp. The beam limps into gloom. Dust glitters. Down there, halfway between then and now, something reflects a slit of light. Jacob feels his pulse answer the ticking. He rigs a rope from the truck bed, cinches it to the old beam he trusts not to betray him, and lowers himself into the cool. An animal has been here at some point. He smells the bitter iron of mouse droppings, sees the nibble marks on a length of rope stiff as bone. At the bottom, his boots crunch on grit. He swings the light. A door lies on its side. No, a hatch, iron, with rivets proud like blind eyes. The hinge looks fused to whatever underworld the mill hides. He crouches, palms the surface. It's cold enough to sting. In the rust bloom, someone has scratched a symbol, a circle crossed by 3 short lines like the sun over water. He's seen it in the ledgers. It marked certain shipments, not grain, not cut lumber. Ashford Special, the ledger called those entries, with no weights, no buyer names, just that symbol and the notation paid in full. The ticking pulses beneath the hatch, not steady now but syncopated, like a secret choosing how to be found. Jacob tries the crowbar. The hatch moans open an inch, then 2. A gust rises, a basement's exhale. Paper, leather, the metallic breath of sealed water turns stale. He cants the beam beneath the hatch to take its weight and heaves. The opening widens enough for him to slide his lamp and shoulder through into a chamber the size of a bedroom. The light picks out shelves, rows and rows of metal boxes, each with a hand-lettered tag dulled by time. 1918, 1919, 1920. Liberty Loan, 4th issue, converted. The tags whisper of war and of the way small towns pull their pennies together to make a dollar scream. In the far corner, a safe crouches like a patient animal. The tick now is unmistakable. Not a clock, but dripping. Slow, measured. A leak in the ceiling where the river once licked. Each drip lands on the safe, counts a century. Jacob sets his palm on the safe. The metal vibrates faintly, a heartbeat conducted through iron. He is not a man prone to poetry, but the sensation climbs his arm like a sentence he can almost read. Upstairs, a board creaks. He kills the lamp. He holds his breath until his lungs pinch. Silence presses. He hears a foot scrape the floor, then a whisper he knows as well as the hiss of a match. Victor Lang, talking into his phone in that low, coaxing way he uses when he wants something to seem like someone else's idea. Mill's open, Victor murmurs. Walked right in. Our friend's playing minor. Get the crew. A pause. Tonight. Jacob waits until the board creaks again and again. Then the slow fading of footsteps and the truck doors swallow. He allows himself the smallest exhale. He thinks of calling Sheriff May. He doesn't. Not yet. If he says the word treasure, something large will wake up in town. Something hungry. He turns the lamp back on and studies the boxes. He opens one with a hiss of old paper. Inside, bond certificates. Serial numbers aligned in tidy columns. The ink a brown that was once black. Each is a promise. A rectangle of debt with an eagle clenched at the top. Bearer bonds. Not in a bank. Not redeemed. Sleeping like bats on a cave roof. He swallows. He is not naive. He knows this is not a chest of pirate gold you drag into daylight and count by candle. This is labyrinth law, the kind of thing men like Victor eat for breakfast. He takes out 3 bonds and slides them into a zippered pocket inside his jacket. Proof, he tells himself, not greed. Then he pulls the hatch mostly closed, climbs, coils the rope and shuts the door behind him. The ticking fades back into the wall's heart. He drives to Ruth Mercado's place because Ruth knows history like other people know prayer. She keeps the Briar Hollow Historical Society in a room above the bakery that smells of sugar and old glue. Ruth listens to his dull, slow words and watches his face with that expression that says she is cataloging not just what he says, but what it costs him to say it. Bearer bonds? She repeats, low. He lays one on the table between them. Ruth doesn't touch it at first as though it might bloom spores. When she finally lifts it, she does it with 2 fingers and a reverence that is nearly ridicule-proof. This is the 4th Liberty Loan 1918, she says, like a benediction. Issued to support the war effort. Paid to bearer. Coupons. My God, there are coupons here uncut. She glances up. If these were never redeemed with interest, don't say it, Jacob says. They could be worth, don't. She presses her lips together. Outside, somebody drops a tray in the bakery and a chorus of laughter climbs the stairs. Ruth lowers her voice to a thread. If you found these on the Ashford property, you need a lawyer yesterday, and May, and you need to keep your mouth closed like it's winter and you're saving heat. The door opens and Sheriff May steps in, hat under her arm, eyes taking in the table. I was on my way to tell you Victor has a crew loading up over by the mill, she says. Then her eyes settle on the bond and something like awe unbuttons her composure. Well, she says, that's trouble in handwriting. Jacob nods. He was in the mill. He knows there's something. May sets her jaw. Victor always knows just enough to be dangerous. Ruth looks between them. If there are boxes of these? There are, Jacob says quietly. May's hand goes to her radio, then stops. If I roll out with lights, I bring the whole town. If I don't, Victor gets a head start. She shifts her weight, a decision moving through her like weather. All right, she says. We do this right. We put the state's name on this before Victor puts his hands on it. State? Jacob asks, stomach pitching. Chain of titles messy as a rooster fight, Ruth says, tapping the bond. Ashford Mill Company went belly up, reorganized twice, failed to pay taxes. After the flood, ownership got as fractured as shale. If this is a historical cache, The state could argue stewardship, but, and this is a big but, if you can tie the cash to a specific private entity that legally or equitably devolved to you via the auction, you have a claim. It's a knife fight in business casual. Jacob exhales. The river's cold breath seems to follow him even here into sugar and books. So we're in trouble, he says. May nods. The good kind. Night comes down like a lid. The mill stands black and quiet against the river's pewter gleam. A van without plates drifts up the dirt road and stops. Men in dark jackets move like shadows toward the door. Inside, the ticking keeps time. Jacob crouches across the road behind a tangle of blackberry cane. May lies on her stomach beside him, binoculars pressed to her face. Victor's cheapest men, she whispers. He saves the good ones for public meetings. Jacob's jaw tightens. He fingers the rope burns in his palm. Ruth waits back at the historical room with a fax machine older than sin and a stack of contact numbers that reach beyond Briar Hollow. The night smells of river mud and cold iron, and the breath of men who think no one is watching. The van's side door slides. Victor steps out, suit under a dark coat, scarf knotted in a way that shows he owns mirrors. He tucks his chin and stares at the mill. Let's be quick, he says. No vandalism. We're securing assets for public safety. Public safety, May repeats, and reaches for her radio. Hearing this? He's rehearsing for the judge already. Jacob stands. Slow. May grabs his sleeve. He shakes free, gentle. He is done being the man who watches while other men rewrite his life. He crosses the road into darkness. The mill hears him coming and answers with its 1,000 small sounds. A cone of grit sliding down a rafter. A mouse pausing in a run. The drip's patient counting. Victor turns, smile pasted. Neighbor. Not tonight, Jacob says. They meet in the doorway. Two men who grew from the same soil into different species. Behind Victor, the hired men fan out like shadows cast by stiffer light. Behind Jacob, the river lifts one shoulder and drops it again. Sheriff May steps into the spill of the van's dome lamp. Evening, Mr. Lang, she says, badge a small planet glinting at her lapel. Sheriff, Victor says, surprised into politeness. We're here under the auspices of hazard mitigation. This structure is unsafe. I have photographs. May's mouth curves. Do you now? I have a county ordinance about entering condemned structures without the owner's permission. Want to compare papers? Victor's eyes flick to the men, to the mill's mouth, to Jacob. Owner? He repeats softly, tasting it. Temporarily, until a court decides how to rectify a tax sale that never should have happened. You could have bid, Jacob says. I don't buy tombstones, Victor says pleasantly. I quarry them. The men behind him shift. One, broad-shouldered, eyes small as buckshot, takes a step toward the door. May's hand drops to her holster without hurry. Don't, she says. He stops. Victor exhales, fogging the night. This is dull, he says. Let's try clarity. He reaches into his coat and brings out a file folder, neat as a kitchen knife. These are draft filings for an injunction to freeze any and all assets discovered within this collapsed liability. He taps the folder. These, on the other hand, he produces a signatory page printed on heavy paper, certain names already inked. Are an agreement and a check sufficient to pay off the liens on your farm, Mr. Hale, plus a generous stipend, in exchange for your cooperation in securing and transferring any hazardous materials found here to a qualified custodian. Hazardous materials. The words sit between them. Cold, thrilling, ridiculous. What do you think is in there, Victor? Jacob asks. Victor smiles. Whatever it is, it needs an adult. May snorts. He brought a check to a robbery, she murmurs to Jacob. Jacob looks at the paper and feels, for a scalded second, how it would be to be free. To hear the barn settle at night and not count dollars in the creeks. To look at the hill and not feel it looking back. He could sign this and wake up tomorrow with breath that doesn't whistle. The mill, as if offended, lets something fall somewhere deep. A plank giving up with a hollow thud that echoes like a gavel. Jacob lifts his eyes to the black mouth of the doorway. He imagines the hatch, the shelves, the safe with the drip marking time on its back. No, he says. Victor's expression doesn't change, but something colder steps up behind his eyes. You're making this needlessly expensive, he says, and not just for yourself. May's radio clicks softly. Ruth's voice, thin through static. State archivist on the line. Also a guy from Treasury who just stopped chewing when I said the words, Fourth Liberty Loan. He will be very interested in a chain of custody that doesn't include Mr. Lang's van. Victor's men look at one another. The big one cracks his knuckles, a small weather system of threat. Victor flicks his eyes toward the mill. Go, he tells them. May steps lateral, fluid, hat tipping forward. Don't, she says again. Her tone is friendlier, but the firearm on her hip is a period that ends the sentence. For a long breath, nothing moves. Then Victor spreads his hands. Paper rustling. Fine, he says. Tomorrow we do this in court. Tonight, we leave as neighbors. He turns. The big man hesitates, then follows. The van slides the night closed behind them and the road unwinds their sound until only the river speaks again. May sags a half-inch. I'll sit the rest of the night, she says. You go home. Jacob shakes his head. I'm not leaving it alone. Down in the pit, the hatch waits like a held breath. They rig lights, the kind you plug into courage. The mill glows in thin slices. Jacob lowers himself, then May, boots skidding on brick. The chamber blooms into view. Shelves, boxes, the hush and weight of paper that outlived its senders. May whistles low. You weren't kidding. Jacob opens 3 boxes and lets the bonds speak for themselves. May radios Ruth, voice steady, and within an hour the room above the bakery becomes a command post of unlikely gravity. Phone cords, coffee, fax paper skittering like fish. They move carefully. May photographs each shelf. Jacob opens the safe with a stethoscope Ruth produces from nowhere. The combination is written in the ledger margin under the symbol of the sun over water, 24/7-18. The safe door peels back slow. Inside, more boxes, thicker paper, and a leather-bound journal that, when he opens it, smells of camphor and winter apples. The journal belongs to Joseph Ashford, mill owner, 1916-1924. The entries skip like a stone, short, urgent, fragmentary. Raised subscription, bonds in hand, keep to river room until price is right. Later, bank fails. Treasurer suggests patience. Later still, don't trust Connor. Keep key with Ruth A. Jacob blinks. Ruth A? He looks at May. She shrugs. We have a Ruth, she says, but not that Ruth. They find a small brass key taped to the inside back cover. It opens a drawer in the safe, and inside that drawer they find the reason the drip sounds like a clock. A tin cup rigged under a narrow crack, collecting just enough water to fall at intervals into a second cup. Not a clock. A signal. A miner's way to count a day when light is a rumor. May sits on her heels. He was keeping time, she says softly, waiting for the world to be something he could trust. They inventory until the night thins, until birds loosen their first uncertain notes. Ruth arrives with a man in a suit who has the posture of someone who is paid to listen. He introduces himself as Daniel Kerr, state archivist, and immediately introduces his hesitation. If this is indeed a historical cache, he says, there are procedures that protect its integrity and, by extension, you. Victor arrives with a lawyer in a blue coat and an expression that suggests clocks obey him. Papers are served, papers are rebutted, the mill listens. The river nods or refuses. Who can tell with rivers? At noon, the judge hears an emergency petition in a courtroom that smells like varnish and old wool. Ruth brings the ledger and the journal. May brings photographs. Jacob brings his hat in his hands and a steadiness that is not theatrical. Victor brings a theory and a checkbook. When the judge asks what the cache contains, Jacob's mouth goes dry. He looks up at the seal on the wall and thinks of his father's eyes. He says promises, and then, because he knows better than to be clever in court, he adds, bearer bonds, Your Honor, Fourth Liberty Loan and others, unredeemed, secured in a room under the Ashford Mill since at least 1920. The judge stares at the photographs, shelves like pews, boxes like hymnals. He presses his lips into a line whose meaning he keeps. Chain of custody, he says finally. Until the court resolves title, no one moves a scrap of paper from that room without an officer present and signatures on signatures. Mr. Lang, do not approach the property without the sheriff. Mr. Hale, do not do anything that makes me regret being a judge in a small town where the river takes what it wants. Victor smiles as if the judge just corroborated his birth. Of course. Outside, cameras appear where there were none. News in small towns rises like heat. Jacob feels the story lifting away from his hands into mouths he doesn't know. He wants to return to the mill's quiet, to the tick and the breath and the smallness where the choice belongs only to him. Instead, he shakes a hand he doesn't trust and returns to the ruin knowing the secret is awake now. The pressure has started. The night before the auditors arrive, the river swells on a storm, and the mill hunkers like a soldier in rain. May posts 2 deputies, but one gets called to a wreck south of town, and the other drifts home for dry socks. Victor watches his opportunities the way owls watch from fence posts. Silent, precise. Jacob sleeps on the office floor again, coat under his head, flashlight in his fist. Wind needles through seams. The door's wrongness seems righter now that it has been named. He dreams of paper wings and wakes to a sound that is not a dream. The scrape of metal on metal deliberate below. He's up, flashlight slicing the dark. "May?" he calls. No answer. The scrape again. He moves. Quiet at first, then faster because quiet is polite and this is not a polite hour. He reaches the pit and the beam of his light catches a figure already halfway down the rope. A man in black, broad-shouldered, the same from the van. Behind him above, a second shadow works the rope anchor. "Stop," Jacob says, voice filling the chamber in a way that surprises him. The man on the rope looks up. His face is a slab cut from a colder quarry. He grins and keeps going. Jacob doesn't shoot. He has no gun, and even if he did, this is not that story. Instead, he grabs the rope and hauls. The man jerks, swears, clutches. Jacob wraps the rope around a pipe and leans his weight, the rope burning his palm. The second man above lunges, knife flashing. Jacob yanks the rope hard and the knife misses, clanging off the pipe in a scatter of sparks. He uses his boot to kick the knife away, then drives his shoulder into the man's gut. Air leaves like a bird flushed from brush. They tumble, slam into brick, scramble like animals shaking rain. Below, the first man drops the last 6 feet and rolls. He is in the chamber now, where the hatch sags open on the shelf glow and the safe waits with its cups counting. He vanishes inside. Jacob feints for the rope and then goes for the breaker box instead. He slams the lever down. The lights die. Darkness eats the room and leaves only the idea of space. The second man curses, blind. Jacob knows his own ruin better by feel than by sight now. He slips aside as the man lunges, hears him crash into the post, hears the breath leave him again. Jacob's hands find the man's coat, shove, twist, and suddenly the man is on his face with Jacob's knee between his shoulder blades. He ties the man's wrists with a length of baling twine because that's what he has, and because rural ingenuity is a species of violence when it needs to be. He flips the breaker. Light returns like a favor reluctantly granted. He swings his beam down into the pit. The first man has an armload of boxes. He looks up, meets Jacob's light, and grins. Then he kicks out the support under the hatch. The iron slams shut. The beam wedges, then slides, then falls with a heavy finality that shakes dust from everything. The man shoots a look to the ladder built into the brick and starts up, boxes against his chest. Jacob drops onto the rope, gloves smoking heat into his skin. He hits the floor of the chamber as the man reaches the lip and drops one box. Paper explodes in a flock. Certificates, coupons, serial numbers filling the air like white moths. The man snarls, swings a fist. Jacob ducks and slams his shoulder into the man's knees. They tumble. The man's head hits brick. He goes soft. Jacob stands, panting. His light finds the spilled paper, the torn box, the hatch closed, the safe patient. He hears a siren far off, then closer. May's voice in his head. He brought a check to a robbery. He climbs, dragging the unconscious weight of the man up by the jacket collar. Every inch a war. May meets him at the lip, face taut. "Deputy's got the other one," she says, jerking her chin toward a man face down in cuffs. "You all right?" Jacob nods. He looks at the paper drift and feels briefly like he's standing in a snow globe where someone else shook the storm. Victor appears in the doorway like a ghost somebody ordered overnight. He takes in the scene, calculates in a visible flicker of eyes and mouth. "Sheriff," he says smooth, "this is unfortunate. I came to ensure the property was secure after hearing a commotion." "Sure," May says, "and I came for the bake sale." He raises both hands. "I see we're past the point of skepticism." His gaze drops to the floor at his feet. He bends, too fast for May to stop him, and scoops up a single bond that has drifted to the threshold. He holds it delicately like a butterfly that might sting. "So it's true," he breathes. He looks up, eyes hot. "Do you have any idea what these are worth?" Jacob looks him in the face. "Enough to make you this reckless," he says. The sirens grow louder. The room packs with uniforms and questions. The men in black ride away in the backs of cars that smell of the same vinegar every jail everywhere smells like. May collects the fallen paper in gloved hands and seals it into evidence envelopes with a patience that is equal parts tenderness and rage. Before dawn, a federal man arrives with a briefcase and a permission letter. He looks around the chamber with an expression that suggests it's Christmas morning, and his name is on every package. He speaks in acronyms that don't reach the floor. Ruth stands beside him and translates into human. Chain of custody, authentication, valuation, legal status of bearer instruments, doctrines neither of them studied but both of them can speak tonight. Jacob lets the science of it flow around him. He is shaking now, delayed and full, the way a man shakes when the animal walking steadily toward him turned out to be a train. He stands with May at the door and watches the river shoulder dawn. Your father would grin so hard it would hurt, May says quietly. Jacob swallows. He'd tell me to keep my mouth shut. Do that too, she says. Victor, excluded now by lines of blue and yellow tape and a deceptively friendly deputy, waits outside with his lawyer and his certainty. As the sun burns the storm smell out of the air, he steps close enough to be heard and says softly, Congratulations, Mr. Hale. You've salvaged something good. Let's see if you can keep it. Jacob turns to answer, but May's hand touches his sleeve, small as a sparrow. Don't feed him, she says. He nods. He turns back to the ruin that is no longer simple. He thinks of the hatch, the journal, the tin cup that counted a century night by night. He thinks of promises written on paper that outlived the men who wrote them. He thinks of a number he does not yet dare say aloud. It takes 3 months to count a century. The Treasury auditors camp in the bakeries upstairs, emerging with powdered sugar on their ties and numbers in their mouths. Ruth's historian's hand makes order of chaos, correlates ledger to bond to serial to myth. May builds a fence of forms and signatures that keeps wolves honest. Jacob's farm, so long a mutter of unpaid bills and the quiet heroics of small endurance, waits while the machine of law grinds a story into a verdict. In April, the statement arrives. In a room that smells of old glue and new coffee, Daniel Kerr reads the number with a gravity that makes it feel like a prayer. After interest, after adjustments and 2 bitter lawsuits that Victor loses with the fury of a man unable to imagine the world refusing him, the value tallies to a figure that hushes even Ruth, $111 million. The room doesn't cheer. It exhales. Something long-held and iron taste leaves all their chests. May leans back and rubs her eyes with the heels of her hands. Ruth puts her head down on her arms and laughs a little. Not amusement, not disbelief, just a sound the body makes when it finally says yes to a miracle it was wise enough not to ask for by name. Jacob doesn't speak. He looks out the window at Briar Hollow's thin main street, at the trout in the outfitter's window he could never afford to waste time catching, at the hill that watched his father back. He thinks of weather. He thinks of time. He thinks of paper that can change a life from a noun to a verb. The court's order parcels the funds with a mercy that feels like structure. A portion to the state for preservation and public trust. A portion to the Ashford heirs, 3 of whom cry, 1 of whom rolls his eyes, 1 of whom sends an email from a yacht. A portion to the Historical Society, that room above the bakery which now smells like possibility and paint. And because the tax sale was deemed good and true and because the court found Jacob's claim clean, a portion to Jacob, not a portion really, the portion, enough to buy back time. Victor does not come to the hearing. His lawyer reads a statement that tastes of lemon rind and loss. The judge thanks everyone as if they have completed a group project. When it's over, May squeezes Jacob's shoulder once. Ruth kisses his cheek and tells him to eat more vegetables because rich men die of the same heart the poor have. He pays the farm's debts first. He replaces the roof. He buys a tractor that speaks with a purr instead of a rattle. He keeps the chickens, because he likes the shape of their noise around his knees. He fixes the window his father always meant to fix. He sets aside a fund for kids who want to learn the river's real history, instead of the postcard version. He says no to 3 documentary crews and yes to 1 high school senior who wants to shoot her capstone with her grandfather telling about the flood. He does not move. When asked, he says, "My dead are here," and that ends the conversation. He walks every morning down to the mill, which is no longer a ruin. The river room becomes a small museum with the hatch left open under glass. The tin cups keep counting for no other reason than that they counted before. People stand quietly and listen to water measure patience. On a cool evening in May, Victor finds Jacob by the river. Without a suit, he looks like a man. He stands a long moment in the way men stand before they try either apology or fire. When he speaks, his voice is not arrogant. It is tired. I thought I could bend it, he says. The story, the law, you. I'm not used to things that won't bend. Jacob nods. You can bend a lot of things, he says, but not time. Victor breathes out a small surrender. You'll make it open to the public? It is open, Jacob says. It always was. We just didn't know what we were looking at. Victor watches the water for a while. He leaves without angling for another fight. Sometimes men walk away without losing face. It looks a lot like humility. The mill at dusk smells of clean stone and old paper, and the damp sweetness of a river that remembers. Jacob stands inside and listens to the tick that started everything. He thinks of Joseph Ashford setting those cups, of the journal entry that trusted a future he would never see. He thinks of his father on the back step, squinting at the hill. He thinks of a town that laughed and then helped, of a sheriff who knows when to be granite, of a historian whose hands smell of glue and bread, of promises. If you made it here with us, if you felt the cold of the river room and the sting of the rope and the hot breath of a man trying to take what isn't his, thank you. If you want more stories where ordinary people meet extraordinary secrets and win by staying ordinary in the strongest way, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what stories your river keeps. There's another tale waiting just upstream.